Resuming debate, the honourable member for Saanich Gulf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for Vancouver East. I confess that I've been struggling as to whether I vote for or against this bill. Now, of course, building homes for Canadians is a great goal, and I'd vote for that. And I kept trying to figure out why it is I'm having trouble figuring out would I vote for it or against it. And I guess it's because when I really study the bill and think it through, it does absolutely nothing, even if fully implemented. And that is troubling. So I'm just going to get to bare bones. What, to Canadians who may be watching, what does Bill C-20 do? It's called an Act Respecting the Establishment of Build Canada Homes. Now, that's a familiar sounding announcement because it was made on September 14th, 2025, when this government created Build Canada Homes as a special operating agency. Now, that's something they've done a couple of times since the new government came in. Special operating agencies operate under Treasury Board in an opaque environment where nothing is particularly visible or transparent and not included in legislation. So we already created Build Canada Homes September 14th of last year. Now we're creating Build Canada Homes, but not as a special operating agency. The bill deals with that. It's now going to be a Crown corporation. This act sets up a Crown corporation. That's what it does. It does not talk about the housing crisis. It does not give tools to address the housing crisis. It sets no targets. It has no timelines. It doesn't talk about the housing crisis. So the purpose is, quote, to promote, support, and develop the supply of affordable housing in Canada and to promote innovative and efficient building techniques in the housing construction sector in Canada. And then the rest of the bill is devoted to how many people on the board of directors, can it borrow, can it lend. My favorite part of the bill, really, which again is a bill about setting up a corporation, is that this new corporation, Build Canada Homes, can actually take money from the federal government and give it to the federal government. So that's, it's lacking, shall we say, in ambition. The bill misses the point that if you're going to take us through the process in this place of passing legislation, it ought to have accountability. The minister responsible, as the member just pointed out from Vancouver East, there is no Minister of Housing named in this bill as responsible. The minister shall be appointed by someone in the Privy Council at any given time to say, oh, of the people around the cabinet table, this week it's Joe. That's the kind of accountability we've got here. That worries me. We also have the fundamental reality that since the end of the Second World War, since 1945, we've had the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC. Was there something wrong with CMHC? Well, it's been massively cut, but did that agency need to be, it's not being scrapped, we'll still have CMHC. The Minister of Housing is responsible for CMHC. That's an entity we understand. Are there endless delays? Are there things that should be done better at CMHC? Yes. But a government that wants to, as we always hear from the Prime Minister, move fast, why not use fit for purpose, the institution we've already got that has in it fewer people who know what they're doing, but still a goal and a principle and a practice that understands housing is a human right. We have two kinds of housing crises in Canada right now, and I want to make sure that that's explicit in the rest of my remarks. We have a crisis of affordability in market housing. People earning good incomes can't afford a good home. A lot of that is due to industry speculation, things like real estate investment trusts, corporations owning housing, making money out of speculation. That hurts. So does the supply of housing not being adequate to our population. The second housing crisis, so the first housing crisis, let me underscore, is a market housing supply problem for affordable housing in rental and ownership. The second housing crisis we have is acute, cruel, grinding homelessness and on the rise. Now, what do we do about that? I want to share an inspiring example because I was so honored to tour a little place called 12 Neighbors outside of Fredericton. It's a few years ago now, but I met Marcel Lebrun, a Fredericton young man. Maybe he wouldn't think he's so young now. He's a multi-millionaire because of his own entrepreneurial instincts and because he got involved in an internet company he built up and then he sold it. And at a sermon from a Baptist church one day, he was called upon to do more. So he made a big donation to a local homelessness group, and then he thought that's not quite enough, and the homelessness problem was growing in Fredericton. So long story short, this is what Marcel Lebrun decided to do. He realized that one of the critical obstacles for building affordable homes and social, non-market housing was the cost of land. So he bought a bunch of land. And then he said, I'm going to build 99 tiny homes on this land, 240 square foot home, but to give a person dignity, a home of their own. They can lock the door, it's their home. And he applied to CMHC for funding. Now, he was prepared to pay 1/3 of the cost of this project out of his own pocket. So he was putting $12 million of his own money into it. CMHC told him it would take about 2 weeks to process it. Anyway, he'd built 35 homes before he heard from CMHC that his project was approved, because it took them about a year and a half. But he got it done, and not only did he get it done, then he saw these problems are acute. We can't take someone who's been homeless or living in a tent in an encampment in the woods and put them in their own home, and magically everything's good for them, because they lack community, they lack social skills. They're still wondering how they're going to make a living. He created a whole network of social enterprise around the housing development he built himself for people in his community. Things like a local restaurant that people come to, where there's people who live in his tiny homes who learn how to work in that restaurant. And a trades shop, so you learn how to use a skill saw. And it goes on and on and on, what Marcel Lebrun has done. And with supports for mental health and addiction, he didn't just build homes. He built a community with love and care and compassion. And it could be done in every community if we thought, gee, let's mandate CMHC to see if they can follow the model of what Marcel Lebrun did on his own to create sustainable long-term housing with strong mental health supports and built-in dignity and community. That's what we should be building. Now, this Build Canada Homes bill isn't about building homes. I'm not being mean about it. If you read it, Build Canada Homes Act is about setting up a Crown corporation. Full stop. Build Canada Homes Bill C-20 is about replacing a special operating agency set up last year with a Crown corporation this year. No goals, no timelines, no accountability, no listening to the briefs that they got from the Assembly of First Nations about engaging Indigenous people, no listening to the brief that they got from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, where the rubber really hits the road at municipal housing level. That's where people have to figure out what we're going to do. Not listening to the cooperatives in this country. The Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada gave a great brief to the committee that studied this bill. But since the bill doesn't include timelines or goals, I think if you actually put meaning into this bill, the clerk of the committee would have said it was outside the scope of the bill, because the scope of the bill is to set up a Crown corporation. And after that, well, I wish the current Minister of Housing a great deal of luck. I hope he becomes the designated minister, and maybe he can make something out of this. But this does nothing more than set up a Crown corporation. We need to do so much more. There will be money thrown at this Crown corporation, for sure. There will be chief executive officers and board members, and it will function as a Crown corporation. But will it do more than what Marcel Lebrun did for the people of Fredericton? You know, the first social housing ever built in this country was in the early part of the 1900s, after the Halifax explosion, when that devastating collision in Halifax Harbor wiped out homes for thousands of people. And government had to build housing for people. And they did it fast. Nobody froze that winter. Everybody was gotten into housing fast. We need to act like it's an emergency, because it is an emergency. Women my age in my riding are living in their cars. This is driving me to distraction. Why can't we find the housing, build the housing? There's so many delays, and they're unintentional in many cases, but they show a lack of political will, and that has to come top down. Yes, there are multiple levels of government involved, but the government, the federal government in Build Canada Homes, should set the standard and set some goals.